Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the 94th episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie, and we have a fantastic question from a listener to answer on the pod today. So let's check in with her question.
Hey Melanie, thanks for taking my question. I have a question regarding the correlation of kidney stones and the new weight loss injections, tirzepatide. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Amanda, for that wonderful question. I've been getting more and more people asking about the GLP-1 medications for obvious reasons lately, and so I think this is a really great topic to tackle on the podcast. So I know that you specifically asked about tirzepatide, but most of the research, and full disclaimer, there's not a ton of research in this area, but the research isn't specifically looking at one or the other. So I wanted to kind of talk about this more in terms of both semaglutide and tirzepatide, and just kind of help you understand maybe a little bit of the differences, because there's a lot of similarities, and we kind of lump them all together into this class of GLP-1 medications. So there are two big different medications that we think about when we think of GLP-1 agonist drugs, and these are the drugs that have gotten all of the hot press lately because people are using them for weight loss. So first of all, we have semaglutide, and the brand names of that is either Ozempic or Wegovy, and those are semaglutide, and these are GLP-1 agonist drugs. The other big group of GLP-1 medications is tirzepatide, and the brand names for that is either Zepbound or Mounjaro. The big difference with this class, the tirzepatide drugs, is that it also has that GLP-1 agonist piece, but it also has an additional function or additional piece of the medication where it also has a GIP-1 agonist or gastric inhibitory peptide. But for the purposes of today, like I said, just because the research in kidney stones hasn't really separated these out, we're going to be kind of talking about all these medications together. As a generic term of this GLP-1 agonists, which includes Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro. So essentially what this means is that these drugs act like the hormone, glucagon-like peptide, and help do good things in the body. All of these drugs were originally founded or discovered or, not discovered, produced to help treat diabetes, because they do a whole bunch of things that are beneficial for people with type 2 diabetes. Most notably that these medications work by triggering your pancreas to release more insulin, and insulin, of course, helps lower your blood sugar. And so if your pancreas perhaps isn't producing as much insulin as it's supposed to, or perhaps your body isn't reacting to insulin as well as it should, as is the case oftentimes with type 2 diabetes, if you can get your pancreas to make more insulin, then you're going to help get your blood sugar levels down, right? Which is oftentimes the goal of treatment for people with type 2 diabetes. They also block glucagon secretion. So glucagon is a hormone that your body secretes when it needs to make more blood sugar. And we need that sometimes because we obviously don't want our blood sugar to go too low. And so, there's all sorts of checks and balances. And basically when your body's like, oh gosh, like my blood sugar is getting too low, I'm going to make glucagon, and that is going to essentially cause your body to raise your blood sugar by releasing more glucose into your bloodstream. So these GLP-1 medications actually block that glucagon or that glucagon hormone from being created essentially or secreted. So that's another way that it can be beneficial potentially for people with diabetes. And then the last two ways that these GLP-1 medications work are the big things that we talk about when we think about how these things control weight, which is of course the very hot topic and why people are talking about them all the time these days. So they actually slow how quickly your stomach empties, meaning that food that you eat stays in your stomach longer. So potentially obviously leading you to feel fuller faster and feel fuller longer, potentially getting you to eat less food, which of course can result in in weight loss. They also actually work directly on receptors in your brain to say like, hey brain, I'm full. And that I feel like is the common thing that people talk about, right? They, people say how these medications reduce all that food noise. So, oftentimes people who are living in larger bodies feel that they constantly can't stop thinking about food, what their next meal is. And this sort of food noise is going on all the time. And they say that food noise is just gone. And that is likely related to a lot of things, but very likely directly related to the fact that GLP-1 medications literally stop receptors or hit receptors in your brain that make you feel full. So you don't have that hunger feeling as much. So, of course, because these medications have become so popular the last few years as they get slowly approved for people with weight loss, or people are obtaining them for weight loss purposes, of course, these questions, very important questions, come up of, well, what are the negative side effects of these medications? Because pretty much no drug in the world has no negative or has no side effects, right? So it's really, really important to understand these things to be able to weigh the pros and cons of taking a medication like this. I'm certainly not going to go over all of the pros and cons of these medications. That is far beyond the scope of this podcast. But I do want to give us a little bit of insight, at least as to what the data says so far in terms of if Ozempic or Wegovy or Zepbound or Mounjaro, any of these medications can cause kidney stones. So as far as I can tell, this sort of myth or this notion that these GLP-1 medications cause kidney stones comes out of just one particular study. So there was a study that was published in Nature in 2025 that looked at a ton of people in the VA healthcare system. So they looked at around 600,000 people with diabetes, and they looked at people who took GLP-1 medications versus other diabetes medications. So I think it's important to note that this is not in the general population. This is just people with diabetes. And they looked to see if there was any differences between people who took those GLP-1 medications for diabetes, again, since these originally are diabetes medications, or other diabetic medications like maybe metformin or something like that, right? And they did find in this study that people who took those GLP-1 medications compared to other diabetes medications had about a 15% increased risk of stones. And that is concerning. So I think it is something that we need to be aware of and something to look into. However, when we look at the other studies that have been published, and there's not a ton, but when you look at the other studies, which are primarily retrospective chart reviews, we certainly don't have any controlled, randomized controlled trials or these types of things to answer this question. But when we look at these sort of retrospective chart reviews, we see that there really isn't alarming changes in urine chemistry for people taking GLP-1 medications. Either potentially some benefits or even potentially no change, maybe a few harmful things, but overall there's not this like overwhelming, terrible change in your urine chemistry in people who take these GLP-1 medications compared to people who don't or are taking different medications. It seems like pretty consistently GLP-1 medications are associated with higher urine citrate, which is a really, really good thing for the prevention of calcium-based stones. I've talked about citrate a gazillion times, but just quick overview. Citrate is a really powerful calcium kidney stone inhibitor. Citrate can bind with calcium in your urine, which dissolves that calcium away. Basically, when citrate binds with that calcium, it can dissolve, and then that calcium obviously isn't available to form a stone. And so there are a couple small studies that have found that people who take GLP-1s tend to have higher urine citrate than people who don't. So that potentially could be a good thing. Some other studies did find that there was slightly higher oxalate. Some people found lower oxalate, and some studies found no change. So overall, there isn't this overwhelming GLP-1 agonists are bad for people with kidney stones. Potentially even good. I think the bottom line is that there really isn't a lot of data out there, but the fact that really large study did find that slightly higher risk of kidney stones in people who took those GLP-1s does perhaps just, if you have kidney stones and you're considering taking one of these medications, bring up these concerns with your doctor as part of the greater conversation of all of the pros and cons of taking this medication. I think there also is some concern that when you are taking this medication, it's doing all these things like we talked about earlier to make you not as hungry. Potentially, there could be sort of a side effect of that, of them making you less less thirsty. And so then potentially if you are drinking less water, then that obviously could have a huge impact on your risk of forming another kidney stone in not such a great way. So I think you have to kind of be aware of that. And also, obviously, these medications result in big changes in the foods that you eat, right? And the types of foods that you eat very well may change. Obviously, the amounts of food that you're eating might change. And so I think it's really important that you are aware of that and plan for that and making sure you are prioritizing still healthful foods, right? Like, it's very easy to go on these medications and say, I'm not hungry. But if you're still just eating Cheetos, right? If you're eating fewer Cheetos than you were before, then sure, then maybe you're going to lose weight, but that's still not like a healthful change, right? So I think it's really important to just kind of be aware that this potential association does exist and there are potential likely changes to your urine and your risk of stones as a result of both the medication potentially, as well as the changes in what you're putting in your body, right? Like the goal is to change how you're eating. And so you just kind of need to be aware of that fact to make sure that your changes still align with whatever, kidney stone prevention strategies from a nutrition standpoint matter to you. And sort of along those same lines, I really just want to put a plug in for working with a registered dietitian if you're taking this medication for any reason, just because the side effects can be quite significant, right? And that honestly, those side effects are seemingly, in addition to cost, seem to be a major reason why people don't continue to take these medications. Because they can be uncomfortable. It can create constipation, abdominal pain, sometimes diarrhea. Like there's lots of these different, very uncomfortable side effects. And if you are working with a dietitian to help make sure that the food that you are eating is well balanced and healthful, there are huge things that a dietitian can do to help you be successful on the medication and not experience all those nasty side effects. And from a kidney stone standpoint, I think the bottom line is, again, just to kind of make sure that you are continuing, obviously, to be aware of what you eat. This medication isn't like a get out of jail free card and you can just eat whatever you want. Obviously, you can certainly be unhealthy in a larger or smaller body, and the food that you eat has a major impact on your health and especially has a major impact on your kidney stone risk, right? And so I would say if you have a history of stones and you are considering taking these medications, I do not think that that history of stones should stop you from taking that medication if you do want to take it. There's certainly no clear data that shows that it's going to massively increase your risk of stones. However, because there is likely going to be a change in your diet and potentially the medication itself could have an impact on your urine chemistry, as always, I would just recommend that you work closely with your urologist or nephrologist or whoever is ordering your 24-hour urine tests. And just check in, right? Like when you start taking that medication, maybe get a urine test, maybe 3 or 6 months after you start doing that, even if it is perhaps a little bit sooner than you would have otherwise, just to kind of check in and make sure everything looks okay. Because as always, we know that all kidney stones are completely different. We know all people are completely different. Our risk factors for our different types of stones are completely different. And so I think, making this overarching statement that GLP-1s increase the stone risk or decrease stone risk is going to be really, really tough because kidney stones are so diverse and there's so many different things going on. I imagine that they could potentially increase risk for some, but maybe could reduce risk for others. And for others still, it might not make any impact. So bottom line is, as always, check in with that 24-hour urine test, work with a registered dietitian to help you make changes based on that urine test, as well as make changes to make sure that the food that you're eating on these medications is healthful and is helping you prevent or treat any side effects that might come up as a result of these medications. But again, there's definitely not this strong association where it's like, oh gosh, these are going to be causing tons of stones. It seems like it's probably a much more complicated picture than that. So with that, I will end this episode of the podcast. Thank you again, Amanda, for that wonderful question. Like I said, I've been getting that a lot. And so I hope that this episode helps a lot of people get a little bit of clarity or maybe unclarity, or at least feel better about taking these medications if it's something that you want to do. And it's not going to like spike your stone risk, through the roof. It's not, we don't have data to suggest that that is the case. As always, if you would like to submit a question to be answered on the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast, I would love to hear from you. You just need to head to kidneystonespodcast.com and you can record a question. It is free, and there is a chance that I will answer it on a future episode of the podcast. So again, as always, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I would not be here without you. I appreciate your support, and I hope that you continue to tune in to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Have a wonderful day and talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.